Welcome to One to One. We're on the road at the Ideafest 2009 in Louisville. Thinkers, philosophers, artists, musicians are here at the Kentucky Center to share ideas, inspire, and meet new friends. We'll meet three of them next on One to One. And up next is Kenn Parks on One to One. Kenn Parks is here. Kenn was a presenter yesterday at the Ideafestival 2009. You're doing a lot of other things in Louisville. Let me just ask you, first of all, to tell us about yourself.
Certainly. I'm a local artist and a community activist, and I'm the founder of R1 Planet. It's an international, global, online action and awareness organization, part of INSC, which is the International Network of Social Entrepreneurs. And I've also been involved with the Ideafest for 2 years.
Now, what is a social entrepreneur?
Social entrepreneur, essentially, instead of worrying about the bottom line, which is profit for most companies or entrepreneurs, we teach people about people, planet, and profit. And we call that the triple bottom line.
Is there a lot of conversation about that subject today? Of course, one of the things you're trying to do, I would imagine, is raise awareness of the conversation that needs to be held around those areas.
Absolutely. There seems to be more of an awareness these days, with the younger people especially. I think a lot of people growing up now are seeing some of the fallacies, some of the things that we've done wrong and wanting to correct that. And we're seeing now people getting involved at a higher rate more than ever before in the history of activism, large part due to the internet. This really has made the world a smaller place. And part of the epiphany behind R1 Planet was all this technology that's out there for socializing and in some business aspects. But one day we were looking at that and I was thinking to myself, no one's really using this to make extremely positive, impactful changes into the world. And this technology exists, so why not come up with a way to do that?
Give me an example of an impactful change that you are working on or that you would like to see, one that might have a global effect and one that might have a local effect here in Louisville.
Certainly. Globally, one thing that we're doing is connecting need with ability, where online, when people register with our site, they basically list 3 needs that they have and 3 passions, experiences, or talents that they possess. And we match those up. So for example, let's say that someone is trying to escape genocide from a country. We can connect them with an immigration lawyer, and they can give them advice or possibly get involved, or if they're willing, even sponsor this person. And it goes to something to a really high intensity like that, all the way down to, say, someone in India or someplace wanting to start a bakery. And we can connect them with someone who has an established chain of bakeries, and they can give them advice and connect, and essentially do a mind transfer, and it's really bringing people together like never before. One of the other things that we do on an international level is get involved with large corporations, large organizations rather, like Sierra Club and World Wildlife Federation, and we bring these organizations together and do global projects and get people involved. Instead of doing an extreme home makeover, we'll do things like an extreme village makeover and things such as that. Locally, we found, almost ironically, that the internet, though it's making the world a smaller place in many ways, it's also bringing people together in cities such as Louisville. You'll find people coming together that have lived in the same neighborhood, same area, but have never met. And we bring them together for community events, we increase the awareness, and we can bring more crowds out to speak out against something or show their support for something. But we do everything in a very positive stint.
You were here at the Ideafest presenting The Art of Activism.
Yes.
Talk to me about that.
The Art of Activism was an idea that we had a couple years ago, and I just kind of forgot about it, and it came back to surface. Being an artist and a former musician, I've always realized the impact that music, the written word, and visual art have on society. And we thought, what a wonderful topic to talk about that. If you look back to any famous piece of music, composers, rock music during the civil rights, the 60s, you look at artists, contemporary and traditional classical artists, how did their art impact society? What did that piece say to people? How did it speak out against governments, against religious movements, or for religious movements, or for governments? Essentially thinking about the fact that without art being present in our lives, what else is there really to define us in such a capacity? You look at some of the ancient civilizations, such as the Anasazi, the Aztec cultures. If we didn't see the drawings and some of the clay tablets, the cave drawings, some of these other things, what would we know about those cultures? This is the only thing that they left behind. And if you think about it from that aspect, take that away from us, a lot of what defines us as human beings would disappear.
Fascinating. And you did that and presented by using a lot of other people. Tell me about some of your presenters yesterday and what they were able to do for the audience and how engaged the audience was.
It was an amazing, we had a standing room only, and the diversity of the people that came together for this, I was so grateful for. We put this together in a very short period, about 4 weeks, believe it or not. It was something that we thought of at the last minute. And we had professors, performers, writers, Judy Jennings from the Women's Center. We had Professor Jerry Tolman from University of Louisville, a jazz professor. Mark, Big Papa Stampley, who is a really famous blues musician. Marvin Maxwell, who played with Soul Incorporated and is the owner of Mom's Music, who is one of our sponsors. He spoke about his experience in the 60s, playing with the Dick Clark Caravan of Stars. And we had people talk about the classical piece, the history behind this, with a couple of Louisville orchestra members. They came and they spoke on Shostakovich, talking about how he used his music to protest the Russian government of the time. And then they actually played a piece on the bassoon and on the flute and showed people the feeling behind his music. Matthew Carr was the bassoonist, and he was kind of funny. He said, "This is a very depressing piece, I warn you." And it was,
yeah.
But it really conveyed the sense of what he was feeling. And I think that's what writing and music and visual art does for us. It gives us that. It's not just something that we're seeing, it's something that you feel, you experience. And I would say that the speakers yesterday truly showed and conveyed how powerful those mediums are for shaping our world.
Do people sometimes lose focus, or for example, in the 60s when that music was being played, it was not necessarily, I don't think, being played, well, some of it was certainly as protest. Later on in the 60s, the late 60s and the 70s, protest music for the Vietnam War, for example.
Right.
But rock and roll, for example, when he was on the Dick Clark Caravan of Stars, was he thinking about activism at that time, or did you discuss that with him?
Not as much with him. He told a really funny story that he was working in a factory, and he got a call in from his supervisor and said, "Someone's on the line, wants to know if you will travel with the Dick Clark Caravan of Stars." And he said, "Yes, I will," and I quit. and he said and he had 3 days to get his band together and kind of go from there. Now, he didn't speak about that as much, but some of the others did. For example, the civil rights movement and the blues. Mark Stampley gave a really wonderful kind of summary of how the blues really started in the slave fields. And we titled his session, "Blues from Necessity to Realization to Celebration." And by that, he kind of showed from that time where it was something that was necessary to get them by, to get people by, to kind of give them purpose in life and in comfort, to where it ended up opening doors, bringing different races together and different cultures together in the club scene, and then going to where now it's a celebrated piece of music that's really considered one of the American mainstays of music. But they really talked about the civil rights. For example, jazz in the 60s and 70s was one of the biggest means of conveying the whole activism for civil rights. And it was done through music more than anywhere else. That way, instead of protesting necessarily and getting the police involved and having people come to disrupt the protest, by doing it in clubs and selling it on albums, they could get the message out. People get the message out to the masses without jeopardizing their own careers or their own livelihood.
How is art being used that way today?
We had an amazing experience where someone from Iranians for Peace came and asked me to be involved, and their son played an accompaniment on the piano, and basically read a poem from the Green Movement, which, if you're familiar, the Green Movement in Iran is to bring peace and freedom to the Iranian people. And something that's interesting is the people in Iran are no different than you and I, generally. Yeah, some people support the government, most don't. And what they did was read this poem in Farsi, which is a very poetic language, almost sings out, and then I would accompany that with the English. And it was so moving, I get cold chills even thinking about it now, but that's one example. The national poet of Iran actually mobilized people from their poems to come out and speak against the government, knowing fair well that they could have their lives threatened for doing so. But it's, I would say, now more than ever, art, visual art, writing, and music is really resurging as one of the primary means of protest, activism, and support for various parts of our lives. For example, the art that many of the artists brought with us to the show, and my own, is used for environmental messages, social messages, for bringing social change, and for spiritual messages.
Is there good art, good activism in Kentucky today?
There's amazing art and activism. It's incredible. You go to many galleries in Louisville and Lexington and other places all around, and you will see people doing activism with their art, music, and writing against strip mining, mountaintop removal, against water pollution. We're partnering with the Kentucky Waterways Alliance. Air pollution. I've got a piece called Hope that essentially I took the skyline of Louisville with a few other cities and put them together, have pollution and destruction and rubble all around, but from the rubble breaks out a single flower. And that represents hope that with a little bit of effort, people can reverse the damage that's been done to the environment. We can make that change. And this art is used to say this without actually stating it.
Should activism, is it something that can be taught? Is it something that someone has to learn of and then get involved in? Is it something that's handed down? Or is it something a friend tells you about? How does one become an activist?
That's a great question. Through various means. I mean, in a large part, I think from just general awareness, and the internet's one of the biggest tools to show that. And one thing that we try to be careful about is to keep it positive. Being negative about something is not going to get you anywhere, but being positive and showing the positive result of what can occur through your efforts will mobilize more people, including people who typically wouldn't be involved in that. But even school-age children, there's so many organizations and groups that are teaching this to kids, and we do some things like that as well, where we get kids to, for example, peace postcards. Alan Weiss is a lawyer in town, and he had an idea to have people put their definition of peace. What is peace to you? Draw it, color it, collage it on the back of a postcard, and send it back to Louisville. We now have 6,000 cards, and in November, the Muhammad Ali Center is going to show these cards in a month-long installation from all over the world. You would not believe the amazing amount of cards, and kids are getting involved. And by doing this, they're not only being active, they're feeling what peace is about, and they're going to think of this, they're going to tell their friends.
What a great demonstration, and we'll look forward to that. Kenn Parks, thanks so much for joining us. From downtown Louisville, the Kentucky Center, Ideafest 2009, I'm Bill Goodman for 1 to 1.